Good evening. I'm Dan Blackburn, and I'll be moderating tonight's one-hour debate for Easy Reader. Four candidates are vying for a single seat to represent District 2 on the five-member Board of Water Replenishment District of Southern California, the largest groundwater agency in the state. The district contains 43 cities, including a portion of Los Angeles County, and focuses on managing and protecting groundwater resources for more than 4 million residents. It manages both the Central and the West Coast groundwater basins. The district works to protect basins through artificial groundwater replenishment to maintain safe levels. Seawater intrusion is slowed by fresh water injection into wells along the coastline. The district was formed 60 years ago. Three of the four candidates are here tonight to discuss their qualifications for the office. Incumbent Rob Catherman and challengers George Uraguchi and George Macias. Thanks to all of you for participating. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes to introduce themselves. Questions from the moderator will follow, and each candidate will then be given 1 minute to respond. Each will have 1 minute for a closing statement. So let's get started. The first question is general, and any of you can respond to it, and I will ask you to all respond to it. What do you consider to be the biggest threat to Southern California's future water supply? And George, why don't we start with you?
Well, just anecdotally, I would think it'd be overuse. I mean, we have a ever increasing population. We have drought conditions, and there's no doubt that we're overutilizing a lot of the water resources that we have, and we have to manage those.
I'm sorry. What was the question again? I'm sorry.
What do you consider to be the biggest threat to Southern California's future water supply?
Well, I mean, we're dealing with climate change, and at the same time, we have to look at independence. I feel that we're doing, at the Water Replenishment District, we are doing enough to be self-reliant, which is great. But when you're a board of directors member representing water, you're representing your community, but at the same time, you're involved with agencies, and you want to be able to have solutions and an approach to be able to come up with how do you solve the dependency of water now and in the future. So there's a lot of resources that we need to tackle in order to solve our problems. But currently, what are we having? We have a lot of infrastructure projects, a lot of current and new that are coming or have been already designed and developed. We must maintain them.
Mr. Catherman, same question, please.
Yes, the biggest problem that we're facing as well, not only our region, but our state and the world is climate change. It is changing our assumptions about water supply. And as a result, we need to look at more locally sustainable sources of water. We can no longer rely on the Colorado River or the Sacramento Delta to provide water for us here in Southern California. Each day, the Hyperion plant operated by the City of Los Angeles and the joint plant operated by the County of Los Angeles Sanitation District, we dump over 350 million gallons of highly treated wastewater into the ocean. We need to reclaim that water, advance treat it, and reuse it.
Okay, Mr. Macias, if you are elected to the board, what's going to be your first priority?
Well, my first priority is going to be, let's see, my first priority is going to be to get together within the community. I want to make sure that the community is involved in the decisions that are going on behalf of the ratepayer. The priority is going to be to tackle the independence of water by continuing to improve on water treatment facilities. Everybody talks about being dependent, and there's avenues and resources to get us there. So I will tackle that head on by, again, implementing policies when it comes to the bonds that are in place already, saying that we could build resources to help us continue to provide quality water.
Thank you. Mr. Yaraguchi, please.
Well, the very first priority, job number one, is to restore some public confidence into this elected position. Now, I've always had this nagging feeling that the decisions that are being made aren't necessarily on ratepayer and taxpayers' behalf, that there's a lot of special interest influence that occurs on that board, and and just water boards in general. And if we look at these mega projects that government seems to enjoy funding through bond expenditures, I also have to question whether we're issuing those contracts on the basis of merit. Do they make sense? Are we issuing them as special favors to special friends? And how does that benefit ultimately the ratepayer and the taxpayer? That's where I would have my primary focus, is looking at that. It's the linkage between ethical, honest government and fiscal responsibility. Thank you.
Mr. Catherman, please.
Yes, my first priority would be to finish our preliminary planning to clean up 600,000 acre feet of salty, brackish water that infiltrated our aquifers the first half of the 20th century as a result of overpumping in our basin. That brackish water is undrinkable, but at 500 to 5,000 parts per million salt is much less salty than ocean water, and as a result is much cheaper to clean up. So our priority would be to clean up that 600,000 acre feet of undrinkable water and create a clean aquifer to be used for pumping and future storage. And as far as contracts are concerned, all the WRD contracts are awarded on a competitive bid basis.
Okay, as the incumbent, sir, Mr. Catherman, maybe we'll start this question with you. Generally speaking, do you consider water to be a public or a private resource? Specifically, do you think water belongs to those with the most purchasing and political power?
Oh, absolutely. It is a public resource, and state and federal courts have told us that it is a public resource. Our agency fought a number of pumpers 20 years ago over that exact issue. They felt that as water rights holders in our groundwater basin, pursuant to a judgment, that they had a right to own that water. The appellate court very firmly instructed them that is not the case, that our water is a natural public resource.
Mr. Macias, same question, please.
Yeah, can you please repeat it?
Sure. Generally speaking, do you consider water to be a public or a private resource? Specifically, do you think water belongs to those with the most purchasing and political power?
Well, again, you're talking about bonds. Bonds are passed through the public. So which means is the public is the co-owners, because through their vote, without a vote, then we don't get nothing done. So my heart solely says that the use of public water is the owners of the public have the right of way. Again, if that wasn't the case, then they wouldn't have the public vote on it. So I'm a true believer of that.
Thank you. Mr. Yaraguchi, please.
Well, if the question again was, is water a public right or a private right? I believe water is a public right. I mean, it's a necessity, to maintain living in Southern California. There are those that think that that they can buy a piece of land and then own the aquifer beneath it. I kind of have trouble rationalizing that because, it's one of those resources that should be available to everybody. It's worth protecting like a national park. It should be protected and made available to the public. And it doesn't matter what neighborhoods you come from. It doesn't matter what socioeconomic strata you come from. Water is essential. Water is a public right.
I have to apologize. I skipped the first part of this debate, and that was the part where each of you would take a couple of minutes to introduce yourselves. So why don't we do that now rather than leave it out completely? I was thinking about maybe tagging it at the end of this, but I think right now might be the good time. So George, since you're up, why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll go on and have the other two candidates do the same thing.
Well, thank you. Again, I'm George Uraguchi. I'm a third generation native Californian, and I grew up in East LA, and I've lived in the South Bay for 30 years. I retired from the IT field, having worked at TRW, Nissan Motors, and McKinsey & Company. My main experience was in the area of financial systems. That experience will help me come up to speed quickly with the real WRD financial workings. I am running for Water Replenishment District for the following reasons: to fight against tax assessment increases, water bill increases, and most important, clean, ethical government. That's the core issue. I have the hope that we can live and retire an affordable, decent life here in the South Bay. And we're told to conserve water, then we get charged even more. So we have a water rate problem. Some figures say up to 40% increase in the South Bay, and I realize that's not all the WRD, but it's a government entity nonetheless with significant transparency and ethics problems to solve. I don't believe professional politicians when they tell me, trust me, give me more of your money for gigantic projects, while they take special interest lobby money like Mr. Catherman does through his multiple lobbying and consulting firms. I have no special interest ties and commit to not ever having any. I got involved with politics to set an example for my kids to get involved. City councils in Redondo and PV have appointed me to several city commissions. In 2000, I was asked to run against Mr. Catherman and his friends on the library board at that time by a bipartisan group of mayors and city council. I got elected and along with the new board fixed many issues. I was appointed by the PV School District on the Bond Oversight Committee, and I left politics in 2004. But my water bill is what motivates me now. I'm also frustrated with the knowledge professional politicians waste our money on lawsuits, enriching themselves and their political friends while threatening our ability to live an affordable life. I'm a concerned, motivated citizen. I am not a so-called water expert or a water engineer, and I don't believe you need to be at a board level. There are experts on staff. I want to bring transparency and ethical common sense decision-making to this board to control spending, which appears to have doubled in 10 years, and control bond issues, which seems to have increased tenfold over the same period, which is ultimately going to cost us taxpayers. I will avoid law. Oops, sorry.
Yeah, we've reached the 2-minute limit. Mr. Macias, please.
So, good evening. My name is Joe Macias, and I would first of all would like to send my blessings and my spiritual support to all who have been affected and are struggling due to the current pandemic, COVID-19. I come from a background that's involved with infrastructure, with pipelines, so I'm a regular guy that has been in the trenches and has performed the work that we're currently discussing, which is infrastructure, water. I've been all up and down the state, involved with design, development, and maintenance of these facilities. What makes me credible, number one, is I have the support of my family. I'm a happily married man. I have 2 teenage daughters, and which allows me to perform this work. I've been blessed to have had the experience of being involved with politics, governmental affairs, which is important because no matter what anybody says, they might have a negative opinion on politics, but politics works. People, decision makers you have to know the agencies that will make a difference for the community, for the benefit of the community.
Thank you.
Some have special interest in, that's good.
I'm sorry, no, we were crossing
Okay,
over.
whether somebody has whether somebody has a special interest in regards to their own personal agenda to politics is something, you know, I don't believe in. Okay, everybody is here to do a good job for the community, and we're going to do the best we can with what we have. But we're all going to be dependent on the experience that we have to make it happen.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Catherman.
Yes, I want to thank the Easy Reader for putting this on, and thank everyone that's tuning in right now to look at this debate. Water is the most important element in life, and certainly here in a semi-arid part of the world. I'm proud to be part of the WRD team that has ensured safe and plentiful groundwater for the 4 million residents in our service area. Groundwater annually provides 80 billion gallons of water, or about half of our drinking water. 15 years ago, we recommended that climate change was having an adverse effect on the reliability of our imported water supply. Thus, we adopted our Water Independence Now, or WIN program, with the goals of keeping our water rates low and becoming independent from increasingly unreliable and costly imported water from the Sacramento Delta for our groundwater replenishment. Last year, WRD completed construction of its advanced wastewater treatment facility in Pico Rivera. This plant's purified water is put into the nearby county spreading grounds and was the last step to make our groundwater basins independent from imported water and 100% drought proof. Now WRD is embarking on a broader, more regional strategy called Win for All. Its goal in the next 2 decades is to use WRD's experience with wastewater recycling to set the stage for projects that use our groundwater basin to recycle purified wastewater for future consumption, freeing the entire Southern California region from its reliance on imported water that may or may not be available in a future altered by climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. This next question can go to any of you. Just raise your hand if you'd like to respond to it. Now we'll end up getting to each of you. Big picture. If you were California's water czar and you had total control over the resource, what would be your first action? Anybody want to take that on? George, we'll start with you then.
Well, if I were water czar, well, I would just make sure that we apportion, and control water as carefully as possible. The water that we have available. That's number one. Number two, I would really spend some resources in making sure that we protect it. What we don't want to have is a replay of Flint, Michigan. And I know that it's a slightly different issue, but if we contaminate our water supply, we're going to be in really serious, no pun intended, hot water if our groundwater reliability disappears. So, and I guess number three, the most important, one of the most important things is, to make sure that we have good stewards of the resource. I would want to make sure that, we can't look at, all of California, but if you're saying water czar over California, is to have good stewardship, honest, ethical stewardship of that resource throughout California.
Mr. Macias, please.
So if I had control of our water resource, I would at this time prepare ourselves for the future of climate change. I know that we went through a process where we were in drought and we had to cut back on our water usage. So percolating, preparing ourselves for future ponds, and making sure that we have to keep an eye on our maintenance when it comes to water meters. I mean, we want to make sure that we start controlling and maybe putting away a little bit of this water because we don't know what's going to happen. It could happen any day, any minute, any time. And we must prepare ourselves because water is the strength of survival for everything that we do. And so my plan would be to control it, to store it, and to make sure we find other avenues for independence.
Thank you. Mr. Catherman?
Yes, I concur absolutely with what Joe has said. Climate change is the situation that we are facing now, and we have faced actually in the last 50 years. Metropolitan studies indicate that our rainfall average has decreased 30% over the last half century. Climate change is going to accelerate that change, and we need to be prepared for it. Part of the solution is going to have to be looking at our water supplies. Our groundwater basin in the San Joaquin Valley is overdrafted. Our groundwater basin in the Antelope Valley is overdrafted. We have to look at local sustainable sources of water, which involves recycling wastewater and reclaiming it, purifying it, and reusing it, utilizing our groundwater basin as a medium to clean up the water further. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, you all know that imported water is a big part of Southern California's water future. The peripheral tunnels is a plan for water transfer under the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. It's a very controversial and for many reasons. Question, do you support the concept? If so, why? If not, why not? And why don't we start with Joe Macias?
Well, again, I mean, the state water project is a huge governmental agency that is supported by the governor. We got to make that very clear. And they're already moving on the process of getting through the environmental report to make it happen. Now, in order for us to move forward as a group, as a team, we must get together with the agencies, the group, the environmental group, to make sure that we'll come together as one. Now, people are quick to look after these infrastructure projects. I believe that we have other means to get us the water that we need. Working with our agricultural farmers so they can recapture water and save it, let it sip down to the aquifers, is a more approachable method than running down and building something so huge that we're not all in agreement with.
Thank you. Mr. Catherman?
Yes, thank you. The Sacramento Delta, as everyone knows, is a mess environmentally. It's a mess with levees, earthen levees that were built more than a century ago without any structural integrity and are subject to flooding. If you look at the San Joaquin River within these levees, there are areas where it's 20 and 30 feet above the surrounding farmland. So something needs to be done with the project up there, that is for sure. But I want to withhold my opinion personally until we see what the environmental impact report says, what are the mitigation measures, and what's being done with the project in its specific design. So I think in concept, it's a necessary project. We're going to have to face the problem with the Delta, both environmentally and as a water supply facility. But let's imagine for a minute what we could do with that $15 to $20 billion in terms of local water supply projects. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. This next question will be longer than your answers. So,
Do you want me to answer that one?
oh, I'm sorry, George. Go ahead, please. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Well, philosophically, I have some concerns, real concerns about any type of a government mega project. It's not comparing apples to orange, or it is comparing apples to oranges, but I'm going to say the nasty words on everyone's mind. high-speed rail, for instance. I would think that it would be cheaper to build an above-ground rail system than it is going to be to build a transport system for enormous amounts of water to bring from the Sacramento Delta down to Southern California. So one of my primary concerns with it, would be the cost and how it's ultimately paid for. I have some serious concerns, again, about our government's ability not only to deliver projects on schedule with the promise, because although I completely applaud that WINS program of water independence, the promise was that we're going to be water independent in 2018, I believe. That was what the promise of WINS was. And I think we're still importing water. Thank you.
Thank you. This next question, just give the answer briefly. I will give you the explanation. Water exporters say they are trying to satisfy several objectives with such a project as the Peripheral Canal: to deliver water for residential, agriculture, and environmental purposes. Please list the order of importance in your opinion: people, farms, fish. And George, since you're up, can you get us started on that?
Ooh, boy, that's a tough one. But it just if I had to prioritize, that was the order in which you gave it to me, was the people, the farms, and the fish. I think it'd be a real hard toss-up between farms and fish, because I'm a fisherman too. I also believe in conservation and environmentalism, but at the same time, we are America's breadbasket. We're also, we depend on our farms to feed us here in Southern California. Of course, I don't believe in high water use crops like almonds as being as being a priority. But most certainly, we have to feed the people. Essential crops, and watering, delivering water to people is important. But you gave me a tough one, but if I had to make the call, that's the call I would certainly make. Thank you.
Thank you. Same question, Mr. Catherman, please.
Yes, interesting hypothesis. I think obviously everyone will say people are the most important. I would put fish next. Keeping our oceans safe and sustainable is one of the bedrock sources of life for us here on Earth. Lastly, farms. We can make farms sustainable. We can change the way you farm. As George says, we can eliminate high water use crops in a desert area and shift to more water sensitive uses. So I think farms should be last, because we can condition how farms are operated. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Macias.
Well, again, I respect agriculture. I respect farmers. I respect fish 100%. But looking at the approach and the answer that I'm going to give is humans were in this earth first. So I would have to put people first. And then I believe that we must take care of our fish. And then there is solutions and resources that are available for the farmers, for them to enhance and build projects and facilities to generate to generate water through injection wells and groundwater, to make them continue to grow and by the needs of the people.
Thank you, sir. Without getting too far into the political weeds here, it is a fact that President Trump has inserted himself into this state's water discussions, and in so doing has upended many years of cooperative negotiations between the parties of interest: the state, the exporters, fishery advocates, and the Delta community. Comment, please, on this situation and give us your opinion as to whether you think Trump was right to do so. And Joe, since you're up, why don't we start with you, please?
Well, we got to look at Trump as a person. He doesn't believe in the environment as much. okay? Because he's willing to go into areas and use his executive power to be able to build infrastructure without the need of environmental reports. So it's kind of hard to deal with Trump because he's going to make a decision and he's going to stick to what he believes in, and there's nothing that you can really do about it. So in that sense, it's kind of hard to give you an answer because he's not going to deal fairly, and he's got the advantage. He's got the advantage of an executive order, and he doesn't respect environment.
Thank you. Mr. Yuraguchi, please.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. I say without getting too far into the weeds on political issues, the president recently inserted himself into the California water situation, primarily by criticizing the Delta smelt and criticizing environmentalists in the Delta. What's your opinion of the president's insertion of himself into a California water issue?
Well, I guess philosophically, just about everybody can insert themselves and offer an opinion. And I think it's more important that, that we act global, think local. And what I'm hoping is if there's anyone that's going to have an impact on how we approach our local water situation is us here in Southern California. I don't like to think of us, being an island, but the reality is that we have to almost think about taking care of ourselves, because I don't think even at the federal level that we're in touch, because oftentimes I don't even think Sacramento is in touch with us, and sometimes I don't even think the county of LA is in touch with us. So from that aspect, it could be campaign bluster. I don't know. But I think to be serious about it, it's up to us to really make an impact.
Thank you. Mr. Catherman, same question.
Yes. Without getting into the weeds on my opinion of our president, I would simply say that I think our governor and our local officials use science to make their decisions. And I'm afraid often our president does not use science. And again, right now we're looking at preparing an environmental impact report, as Joe indicated. And I think we let the science dictate how we're going to manage water. We have been operating under the assumption that we would have co-equal goals in the Delta, water supply, one goal, and environmental restoration, the other goal. We need to balance both of them. And I think the president came in a heavy-handed, autocratic manner. I think it was unfortunate.
Thank you, sir. The district has plans for construction of a $150 million regional brackish groundwater desalting plant in Torrance. Your thoughts on this project, Mr. Macias?
Well, everybody seems to discuss desal. And I understand why they discuss it. They discuss it because of the fact, I'm talking about ocean desal. They discuss it because right away they want to go into, blue collar workers and making sure there's economic growth by having jobs. Well, the brackish project, I feel it's a great project because it's going to create opportunities for good quality water. I mean, you're eliminating ocean. The salt is sipping through. You're going to capture it. You're going to osmosis it. Be beneficial for the community that's involved with the WRD. So I believe in it. I want to make sure, somehow or another, I want to be involved with it to oversee the equipment, the mechanical part of it. But overall, it's a great alternative to ocean desal.
Thank you. Mr. Yuraguchi, please.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, it's $150 million of ratepayer money that's going to a project. I'd have to ask, the basic questions because I don't have the answers to them. I'm not intimately in the trenches with this project because I'm not on board. But is this project going to actually return the promise that it purports? That's number one. Number two, is it going to be done on budget? Is it going to be done on time? And it has a contract. Are these contracts going to be awarded on basis of merit and value to the ratepayer? Those are the questions that I would have. But is it going to really return the promise that we floated? I would assume a capital bond. That's what I would need to have, is that evidence that we're going to get the return on investment and that it's going to be completed on time, on budget, and awarded ethically.
Thank you. Mr. Catherman?
Yeah, I shared Mr. Uraguchi's concerns about the timeliness, the cost containment, and fair bidding on projects. We're mandated by state law to do competitive bids. But I think this project is a win-win-win. First of all, it is going to clean up a source of contamination in our aquifer that will enable us to start using our full pumping rights. Each year, we're letting 25,000 acre-feet of pumping rights go to waste. Number two, it'll provide future space in the aquifer once you have cleaned it up to put in recycled water on an annual basis. And when there's excess imported water available in wet years, we could also store water there. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly, given our COVID crisis right now, providing infrastructure jobs for the community, I think is absolutely essential.
Thank you very much. Any of you can handle this, so it'll go to all of you eventually. How do you think climate change is going to impact planning for future water supplies in Southern California? Anybody want to handle that off? Take off?
Well, if you don't mind, I'll go.
Sure.
It's anecdotal that with climate change, that means that there could be less rainfall or increased rainfall. Either way, we have to look at water as a depleting resource, and that can be replenished. So it's got to be in order to attack what the results of, let's say, if we go into drought conditions and we start losing water, is we have to look at conservation methods and maybe tax incentive for homeowners, for businesses, for farms to conserve water, to recycle water, to use recycled water. Instead of relying on these government mega projects to cure all our ills, because if anything, they seem to be money sinks versus returning any real value. Those, that's the primary concern that I have, and why I'm running is, are we actually realizing any of the promises of spending a lot of money on these government projects?
Mr. Catherman?
Yes, I too share George's concern about fiscal responsibility. But the fact of the matter is that recycled water projects are cheaper than imported water right now. I don't want to throw West Basin under the bus, but West Basin water costs $1,500 an acre foot. And there's reasons that that's the case, and I understand them. But groundwater in our basins costs $380 an acre foot. To produce a recycled water project, we can produce water at $1,200 an acre foot, which is $300 less than imported water, believe it or not. So I'm all in favor of locally sustainable groundwater projects.
Thank you very much. We haven't really gotten into the subject of desalting yet.
Can I answer that question too?
Oh, I'm sorry, pardon me. Okay. Thank you for bringing me up. Go ahead.
So you said, what is climate change in regards to the future of the impact?
How will climate change impact the future of Southern California water supply?
Oh, impact the future of a water supply, not water projects? I think you said water projects.
Well, water projects and water supply are pretty much joined.
Okay. Well, again, yes, climate change is a pandemic that we currently are not aware of its potential that's going to have. But I know that there's talks about creating uh, ecosystems, green, building in green, whether it's building green permeable pavements, green roofs. So that's some projects that can continue to be in place and prepare us for the future of climate change. Now, this pandemic that we're currently in, a lot of revenue was lost, a lot of it. And I can just imagine the revenue that's going to be lost with climate change. So preparing for the future by conservation is the key for the entire community. Thank you.
Thank you. I keep hearing that desalting is too expensive. On a personal note, 40 years ago, I was being paid quite well, as a matter of fact, to make exactly that same argument, because the people that I was working for supported construction of overland storage and conveyance projects. So today there could be 40 years of research and development aimed at lowering the cost of desalination. Given this, what is your position on the question of desalting as a future source of fresh water in Southern California? George, can we go with you, please?
Oh, thank you. I never say never. I keep an open mind, but right now, my thoughts on desal is it is expensive. It's the most costly option. And again, do I have confidence? Do you have confidence in these government mega projects to be done on budget, on schedule, and done ethically? That's where I have some heartburn over an issue. Oh, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. But desal, as I said, the technology could change. I mean, when I was at TRW some 20 odd years ago, it was commercially not viable to put cable TV into everybody's house. That was very expensive technology back then. And now it's ubiquitous. So at a time where we get our technology, if desal becomes cheaper and the technology becomes cheaper, and we have the energy to power these plants, then it may become a viable option that I keep an open mind to.
Thank you. Mr. Macias, same question.
Okay, so you said it correctly. Back in the day, back years ago, desal was very expensive. I believe currently with the imported water and the desal, I think it kind of breaks out even. Now, again, people are quick to go into building something so huge. And a person that's involved with pipelines and development, I could say the community, the infrastructure, the economy is going to benefit from jobs. So I believe in it. But here's the deal. We got more issues to be focused on. We got to maintain our facilities today. We don't even know what we have. I mean, our equipment is failing. So why are we going to spend money on something that we don't even have the capacity to take care of our own facilities? We got to take care of our facilities first. Make sure they're running efficiently. And then we can look at something that huge. Maintaining and building infrastructure and water treatment facilities is a path towards keeping jobs in the community.
Thank you. Mr. Kefferman.
Yes, I think your question was statewide, do we believe in ocean desal projects? So I will try to answer that question. It depends, and it depends on your location and your other sources of water supply. For instance, San Diego chose to build a 70 million gallon ocean desal project in Carlsbad because they have no groundwater. So they have no backup source of water for their imported water system. And obviously San Diego is at the end of the pipeline for state water project. So here in Southern California, and particularly in our region, We have a lot of other sources of water, reclaimed water that we could use. Our brackish desalting project, which is treating much less salty water and therefore is much cheaper.
Thank you. While you're up, let's just continue on to the next question. Mr. Catherman, your opinion regarding the El Segundo project, please.
The ocean desal project
Yes.
you're speaking of in particular? Okay. Well, I have a personal opinion, but our official opinion as a director at the Water Replenishment District is we are not making a public statement about it.
Okay.
We have a competing project, if you will, our brackish water project. So I'm leaving the ocean desal project to West Basin.
Are those competing or complementary projects?
Well, at this point in time, they may be competing. At a future date, they may be complementary.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Mr. Yuraguchi, please.
Well, so we're talking particularly about the El Segundo project.
Yes.
Okay, well, again, I have environmental concerns as well. Selfishly, I surf, I surf in El Segundo. That's number one. But more importantly, again, these are these mega projects that I have a lot of questions about, and we're being told that we don't have enough energy, that we have these rolling blackouts that we're subject to, and my understanding is these desal projects do require an enormous amount of electricity. Some people have made the argument that we can use what do they call that, replenishable energy or recyclable energy. I forget, the term escapes me. But again, I have some real concerns about being able to maintain and sustain a desal plant at this time with the current technology and with the current state of, again, my personal distrust of government spending my money the right way.
Thank you. Mr. Macias.
Well, when it comes to the El Segundo desal, I'm not sure exactly how far the conversation has gotten. I know that the desal in Huntington Beach has been going on for years and years and years, and nothing's been done. So the agencies and the people that are behind pushing for desal, again, they're interested in jobs. I was one back in 2015 that was pushing for a desal. I was, because I was involved with an organization that wanted to put jobs first. But now that I'm more experienced and understand where we could put our resources at, then I feel that in the end, we all come together, we provide jobs by other means, and we must get the input of the community, because in the end, those cities that are around El Segundo are going to be either the benefactors or the unbenefactors of that plant. So overall, it must be a united front to make sure that desal in our area, like my brother Catherman said, we got other resources. Thank you.
Thank you. The Water Replenishment District is, I think you all will admit, a very little known public agency.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it important for the district to raise its public image? And we'll start with Mr. Catherman, please.
I think it, to the extent that Water Replenishment District is part of our water family, supplying water to Southern California, I think we need to, all of the districts need to raise our public image, if you will, because we all need to be aware of where our water comes from and how we are using our water. So to that extent, I would say, yes, I think we should, West Basin should, Central Basin should, LA Department of Water and Power, Sanitation District, all the local water agencies. And I think the other thing that we should look to, as Joe Macias has indicated, we need to look at cooperating with each other. Right now, we have signed memorandums of understanding to create joint power authorities with both LA Department of Water Power and the Bureau of Sanitation to utilize our groundwater aquifers to store and replenish future recycled water projects from those two agencies.
Thank you. Everybody, is it? Okay. Let's go with closing statements. Each of you, I think, will have 2 minutes. Is that correct? 1 minute? Russ? Okay. Okay. Closing statements.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was told that it was 1 minute.
Yeah, it was a 1 minute closing. So we still have.
Yes.
I would like to answer that question. If I may.
Go ahead, George.
This is Joe.
Yes.
In regards to the WRD,
Right.
making sure that that we have a data friendly type of information, so that a regular person can understand it.
Amen.
Our youth can understand it. I mean, how are we going to educate our community on water when we go into the site and it's just overbearing? The Albert Robles Center in Pico Rivera, now that's a friendly place. You press buttons and it tells you how things are working, and it makes you understand the process. We got to look into that future of that.
Thank you.
If I can chime in real quickly on that one, is I absolutely believe that there should be education, and that there should be more outreach, and there's got to be some citizen oversight. I mean, I'm not going to pull any punches here. I mean, I've watched Chinatown and Goliath, and from what I can see of our water boards across Southern California, I mean, it's only scratching the tip of the iceberg in terms of citizens need oversight into these water boards, because they're just too important, and they shouldn't be allowed to kind of hide in the shadows and do whatever they do.
Thank you. Mr. Catherman, we'd like to wrap up with 1 minute, please.
Closing statement?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I think that the real key to a sustainable, drought-proof water future lies under our feet. Although we can't see them, the groundwater aquifers managed by WRD are actually a huge natural reservoir containing over 200 billion gallons of unused storage space. Using this space to capture and store water supplies, both reclaimed and stormwater, requires less energy consumption and infrastructure, and as I'd said earlier, is cheaper than imported water. As climate change and water shortages continue to disrupt our norms, WRD is committed to strong regional partnerships and innovative projects so our local water agencies, despite climate change and drought, can continue to provide their customers with safe, reliable, and affordable water. And that's my pledge for the future.
Thank you. Mr. Macias.
Okay. I want to thank Easy Reader News, Hermosa One. I also would like to thank Dan and Russ and Jessica and our voters for being with us here tonight. A fundamental change is needed through community partnerships. And again, I'll repeat it, friendly data information to tackle the tough problems of our independence of water. Working with other agencies to bring consumers clean water is something I will work tirelessly on the behalf of the voters. Adopting policies like something that I'm very, very proud of is career technical education of our youth through schools will help us prepare for the future of climate change. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be quick, but we all must come together as one to address the needs of quality water. I want to thank you all. Vote for Joe Macias, and I'll see you guys soon.
Thank you. Mr. Yuraguchi, please.
Thank you. My appointments to multiple commissions, oversight committees for bonds, and the positive results when I got elected to the PB Library District demonstrate my common sense approach to responsible fiscal and ethical stewardship. I have bipartisan support from current and former mayors and city councilmen. I defend Prop 13, and to be clear, I'm against the desal project. I do not have a personal financial stake in this position as a paid lobbyist, a consultant, and political fixer, nor will I ever. That's my promise, to fight for taxpayers. And I agree with what's been said that we have to work with these other water districts, but if I got elected, I'm not going to demand to be paid as a consultant to these other water districts like is currently happening. Do you want business as usual, or do we clean house and start fresh with transparent ethical decisions without special interest influence? I'm qualified to take this challenge on. Google our names and do the search, then make your choice. I want to make a change for transparency and ethics first. Georgia Ragucci, vote for me. And see the promises I'll make to you voters, georgiaragucci.com. And I'm also on Facebook for clean government and clean water. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And that brings our initial debate tonight to a close. I'd like to thank the participants. Your answers were very informative, and greatly appreciate your taking the time to sit with us and talk to the people. So thank you very much. And
Thank you.
good night.
Good night.
Good night, guys. See you guys all soon. Nice meeting you, George.
and go.
Good evening. My name is Dan Blackburn, and I'm moderating tonight's 1-hour Easy Reader debate. We have 3 candidates competing for 1 seat on the West Basin Municipal Water District Board of Directors. Incumbent Carol Kwan has been on the board since 1996. Kwan has declined to participate in tonight's event. She is being challenged by Desi Alvarez and Doug Solomon, both of whom are with us tonight. Thank you both for participating.
You're welcome.
Thank you
The
for
West
having me.
Basin, the West Basin Municipal Water District provides drinking water for 17 cities and unincorporated areas of Los Angeles County and is a member of the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. According to the West Basin, it serves approximately 900,000 people. Its water sources include imports from the Colorado River and the State Water Project, recycled local supplies, desalted underground, and conserved water. An ambitious plan for a water desalinating plant, off the coast of El Segundo emerges as a real flashpoint in this election. The candidates are vying for a position on the board representing the cities of Hermosa Beach, Manhattan Beach, Redondo Beach, Lomita, and a portion of Torrance. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes to introduce themselves. Questions from the moderator will follow, and each candidate will be given 1 minute to answer my questions. Each will have 1 minute for a closing statement. So at this time, please introduce yourselves. We'll start with Mr. Doug Sullivan.
Hello, I'm Doug Solomon. I'm running for the board of West Basin Water District. I'm a native Southern Californian, a waterman, and an environmentalist. I've been interested in water issues since the early 70s when we had our first severe drought with water rationing. I started studying West Basin Water District when I caught wind of their plans for an ocean water desalination plant. In addition to going to all the public meetings, I've read the environmental impact report cover to cover and attended the special board meeting when they approved the EIR. I've also been to dozens of West Basin board meetings, finance committee meetings, engineering and operations, and public outreach meetings. Within these, I've come to the conclusion that West Basin has lost focus on its mission, and its mission is providing clean, affordable water to its residents. West Basin should really only have 3 things it spends its energies on. 1 is running its wastewater recycling plant to full capacity. 2nd is to encourage recycling and to drive reductions of residential and business water use. And 3rd is to distribute water, which Metropolitan Water District imports, which is a minor thing. I'm running to stop ocean water desal, stop other imported water projects, and get West Basin to only spend money and time on things that have to do with its mission. West Basin is a $225 million business. At board meetings, finance committee meetings, engineering and operations, they don't look at the numbers. They don't produce understandable reports. They don't ever talk about whether they're on budget. They give lip service to how many gallons they've sold, then talk about their pet projects. The key here is conservation. If we reduce water use by 15%, we will raise 20 million gallons a day. California, in its Water and Drought Plan Act of 2019, had an aspirational goal of 55 million gallons a day. We're using well over 130 gallons per resident per day here. There's plenty of room to conserve 15%.
Thank you. Mr. Alvarez?
Good evening. I want to thank all of the participants out there, and also thank Kevin Cody and the Easy Reader for sponsoring this forum. My name is Desi Alvarez, and I am running for the West Basin Municipal Water District Board of Directors, Division 3 seat. A little bit about myself. I'm originally from Cuba, came here as a boy, lived in Albuquerque, New Mexico in foster homes for a couple of years. Eventually was fortunate enough to be reunited with my parents and settled in Culver City. I went to Loyola University in graduate school at University of California at Davis, where I studied engineering, focusing on environmental engineering and water resources. I'm married. My wife, Margaret, and I live in Manhattan Beach. We've been here since 1996, and we're very happy and very fortunate to participate in the community. I'm running for the West Basin Municipal Water District because I think I have the expertise to make some changes there. And my mission is to stop the ocean desalination project. I believe it's too expensive and it's not needed, and resources can be better spent on other projects. Reduce the region's dependency on imported water, and the West Basin Municipal Water District is in a good position to do that if with the proper leadership. Reduce the operational costs and the perpetual annual rate increases so that we can keep our water affordable. And I'm running to improve overall transparency. The West Basin Municipal Water District is a little known agency with a huge budget, $225 million annual budget, serves a huge population, and it needs to be doing a better job of reaching out to the communities it serves and the residents that it's responsible to. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, too. You both mentioned the desalting plant off the coast of El Segundo. The district recently approved a final hurdle in the planning for this particular project, an environmental impact report, which addresses the plant's potential to mitigate adverse effects on marine plants, fish, and wildlife. You've both touched on the subject, but would you give us some more detail on your thoughts on this project's benefit or lack of same? And we'll start with you, Mr. Alvarez.
Okay, I believe that the environmental impact report does identify a lot of the deficiencies in the plant. However, it doesn't resolve them. It just acknowledges them and shifts some of them to a later date. Let's start with the fact that the plant will have an adverse impact on the marine environment. Both the intake and the discharge from the plant are not 100% mitigated. And the intake, you're going to be creating suction for small crustaceans and larvae from fish that will adversely impact biotic populations. And then in the discharge of the brine from the plant, will create a concentrated zone of basically very toxic water. Fish will avoid it, and over time, it's going to be a dead zone. In the big scheme of the ocean, people would say it's a small area. However, it's an important area and something to be considered. I think that better can be done. And so one of the reasons is just the environmental impacts.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan?
I believe the board should not have certified the environmental impact report under the California under CEQA Environmental Quality Act. I think it was inadequate. I don't think it properly looked into the risks to marine life, ocean, and environment. And I think also it's going to be a large burden on the population who live there now. It's going to affect traffic patterns. And it is a major contributor to greenhouse gases and holes in the ozone from all the energy it takes to run desal. Desal's an energy pig. To build desal, they're trying to do 20 million gallons a day, which will cost $700 million to $1 billion. That will take debt service from 24 million to 100 million, and West Basin will charge the local cities. The Poseidon plant in Oceanside has been a disaster for San Diego. The cost of the desal water in 2021 is going to be $3,000 per acre foot, as opposed to $1,100 for what they pay for imported from Metropolitan. It makes no financial sense. It's irresponsible.
Thank you. Let's stay on this desalting plant for a moment. Years ago, 40 years ago, I was in a position to advocate for overland conveyance and delivery projects as opposed to desalting. In fact, I was paid to say that desalting was far too expensive to be a practical solution. After 40 years, do either of you think that perhaps research and development over that period of time might have brought desalting into a little more realistic arena? Mr. Sullivan?
I do not. The basic technology of reverse osmosis filters and doing advanced treatment has not changed that much. It takes a great deal of energy to pump the water and drive it through. I think we have a perfect example from the Poseidon plant, which came in over budget. San Diego had to do a 20-year take-or-pay contract, so they're forced to pay $3,000 per acre foot for water they don't need. The biggest problem with desal is how much energy it uses. So places like Israel, other places in the Middle East, Australia, people where they don't have other sources of water, other options, it makes sense, but it doesn't for us because we import enough water to take care of it. And we've got 250 million gallons a day coming from the Hyperion treatment plant that City of LA wants to wants to treat all of that. The state of California is going to allow direct potable use in 2023. The rules will be out. We can work with Metropolitan Water District to get our plant doing 100 million gallons a day at a much cheaper cost than desal.
Thank you. Mr. Alvarez?
Well, over the last 40 years, the reality is there has been some improvement in membrane technology, and the cost of desalination has come down. But the cost of desalination has not come down to a practical level where it's affordable water. There are a lot of better alternatives today to the desalination process. In Southern California, we can still extract more water by doing a better job in conservation. And I think that the biggest single potential in California is direct reuse. We have wastewater today that is being recycled, and the West Basin Municipal Water District does a really good job of that. It needs to do a lot more of that. As Mr. Solomon said, we can go up to 100 million gallons per day. We could probably go beyond that, and that water can be put to beneficial use. And we're doing some of that today, but we're putting that water in the ground and extracting it 1,000 feet away. It's better to just short circuit that and go to direct reuse at some point in the near future.
Thank you very much. Next question. Would you elaborate, please, on your position on any salary, benefits, and expenses for West Basin directors? Mr. Solomon, can we start with you, please?
Okay, I believe that West Basin directors do deserve some compensation for quorumed meetings that run at least an hour. There takes prep time to get ready for them. I believe that compensation is okay. What is not okay is they've been taking their per diem rates for telephone calls with staff, for attending community meetings that have nothing to do with water, for running around the country to attend conferences, which they just can enjoy and can justify for it. So I think it's not the issue of the per diem, it's where they spend the per diem. And the per diem isn't the issue, it's all the money they take from our water rates to spend on charities, chambers of commerce, government, Hong Kong Alumni Association lunches. The true problem isn't the per diem, it's where they waste the money. So $273 of every acre foot that they charge us is for their overhead. They can unilaterally set that at whatever level they like. The per diems is a minor part of the excess money they spend that we need to stop.
Thank you. Mr. Alvarez?
Well, I have to agree with a lot of what Mr. Solomon said. I think I've been saying a lot of those things for a long time myself. The overall compensation for the board, if you look at a $225 million budget, is not that large. But if you're looking at keeping water affordable, and we do serve a lot of disadvantaged communities within the West Basin Municipal Water District, then you have to look at all of your costs. And some of the costs that the West Basin board members take advantage of, such as the per diems, the travel to conferences, the lavish use of the money to basically fund their outreach efforts at various community groups, is something that can be cut back a long ways. And it would go to set an example of how you can keep rates low. And I think it's very important. We forget that not everybody in the South Bay is rich. We do serve poor communities like Lawndale and Lenox.
Thank you very much. That leads nicely into the next question. Do you believe that West Basin water rates are fair and reasonable? And Doug, we'll start with you, please.
I believe they could be lower. When I look at fair and reasonable, I think the $273 per acre foot for their overhead is unconscionably high and should be dramatically reduced. When I look at water rates for other communities, it's basically in the middle. I'm not justifying they're not wasting money. I think they are, and I'd like to bring water rates down. But our water rates are about a third of what people pay in City of Los Angeles DWP. They're equal to other districts I looked at. It's cheap in Pasadena because they got a lot of groundwater and reservoir. The issue is of West Basin charges $1,441 per acre feet. Sorry to geek out on the numbers. 1,200 of it goes to Metropolitan Water District. The 273 we should be able to drive down by at least 30%, and that will directly drive the prices down. And I agree with Desi that we need to focus on environmental justice and some water subsidies for the lower income members of West Basin.
Thank you. Mr. Alvarez?
Well, I think there's a lot of room for West Basin Municipal Water District to reduce their rates. And why it's important for West Basin Municipal Water District to reduce their rates, because they are a primary driver in the cost of the retail water that we pay. We don't pay our water bills to the West Basin. We pay it to the local cities we live in or the private water company that serves our cities. However, one of their key drivers and justification for raising their rates is, well, our rates are always going up. And as someone who managed a water system and did not raise rate in 13 years, I'm telling you that it can be done at the retail level. And part of that is you've got to make sure that at the wholesale level, those water rates are controlled. And I believe that there's a lot of room at the West Basin to do that. Just increase the operation. Why do you have a contract that's no bid, over $10 million, that on and on and on? At some point, operational contracts should be bid. It will lower the rates.
Thank you very much. Next question. Do you believe that district board members are taking advantage of their positions? Mr. Solomon, we start with you.
Oh, what a controversial question. After I win, it's going to make board meetings a little difficult. I think the board has used their position to increase their personal brand. I think the organizations which West Basin belongs to, the charitable money they give, it's more to build their brand than have anything to do with bringing us clean water, conservation, or doing recycling. I worry about the conflicts of interest built into the system of regional water districts with metropolitan water district. The president of West Basin is the president of Metropolitan Water District. She does a great job at both, but there are times what's good for West Basin residents is not what Metropolitan Water needs. Metropolitan may want to spend a lot of money, a lot of capital to provide water to other areas that we don't need because we're managing our water use. So I worry with the design of this system, the conflicts of interest get them to make some different decisions.
Thank you. Mr. Alvarez?
I think that the West Basin Municipal Water District Board of Directors should be doing a much better job. I think they should be focusing on their mission, and their mission is to ensure that we have a safe, reliable, and affordable water supply. And in doing that, they do not need to be spending money on the self-promotions that Mr. Solomon referred to. Does West Basin Municipal Water District really need to be a member of every single Chamber of Commerce? Do they need to be at every just all of these different social clubs, et cetera, that they contribute to? A lot of this is just self-branding by the board members. And so, no, they're not doing a very good job. They're not focusing on their mission. They're not paying attention to what they're doing. They're not managing their staff and the operation to the level that should be managed. And I think that there should be a change in the board, and that the board policy should dictate that. And that may mean some change in the management also.
Thank you. Mr. Solomon, what would you say to a proposal to limit terms of board members?
Yes, the fact that we don't have term limits is just scandalous here. The people the board members are not putting in the work. I go to the committee meetings, I read the papers before, they show up and haven't seen what they're looking at in the board meeting. I think as everything else, I would see a limit of 2 terms on the board at 8 years would be much better than these long things they run. To point out how out of control this board is, they have named a building after a man who's still on the board. He's a wonderful board meeting, a good guy, has done a lot of public service, but we don't name buildings after people who are still on the board of directors. So term limits, yes. Let's get people in who want to do the work, want to contribute, want to make the changes. I agree with Desi. I want to look at every bit of operations. I do not like the no-bid contract to Suez for running the wastewater recycling plant. And Suez is the prior employer of our general manager. We need to look at all these things. Without term limits, the board just isn't interested in it.
And Mr. Alvarez?
I'm a firm believer in term limits. Ultimately, the only way you affect change is to move things through an organization. And an organization becomes stale when people are there for a very, very long time. So term limits, I think, would be a very effective way to improve the overall operations of the West Basin Municipal Water District, and not just the West Basin Municipal Water District, a lot of the agencies that we see. I think that everybody requires a little bit of fresh blood. Fresh blood is a good thing. It allows for somebody to bring in new perspective. It brings in new ideas. It doesn't have the continuation where people just get into a rut and then become very comfortable and are not thinking ahead and are being proactive. So in my opinion, we do need to have change our term limits at the West Basin Municipal Water District, and not just there. This is a problem throughout these different municipal water districts, and there's quite a bit of them.
Thank you. Mr. Alvarez, keep going with you. And what do you consider to be the biggest threat to Southern California's water future today?
The biggest threat to California water usage today?
Mhm.
I think that the biggest threat to water usage is a lot of our communities do depend on groundwater, and that and that's a good thing. Groundwater is a very effective way to meet our water supply, but we need to be very careful with it. We're finding out that there are new contaminants that we need to worry about. One of these is PFAS and PFAS. These are called perpetual chemicals. They're now are being found in our groundwater, and they do need to be treated. So that's one of the areas that I think we should focus on. But even treating that water will still be a lot cheaper than doing any desalination that we're ever contemplating. And I would like to encourage the use of groundwater.
Mr. Solomon, same question.
So I think the biggest threat to our supply is just we don't want to import more water at billion-dollar projects. We are going to have population growth. So the only way to meet the water needs of the population is through conservation. We live in a semi-arid region that's really a desert to a large extent, and have swimming pools that are uncovered, have lots of lush green lawns. We need to be drought tolerant on all these things. We need to use less water, dishwashing, less water, shorter showers. We can raise the water through conservation. And I think the threat to having enough water is conservation. I will agree with Desi on two things. I don't think we do a very good job in Southern California, or really the United States, on capturing groundwater runoff. It's really not something that has to do with West Basin. They always like to give an excuse they don't have enough spreading grounds to recover more groundwater. And we need to do better on that. And the state legislature is moving to clean up the water and get the toxic chemicals out. So that is something I agree also that needs to be taken care of.
Thank you.
Can I add something to that?
Pardon me, go ahead, sure.
Can I add something to that? When we talk about replenishment, that there, and one of the things that Mr. Solomon said is that West Basin says they don't have the replenishment grounds, but they do a lot of replenishment. They're the primary source of water, whether it's imported or recycled water, that goes into the groundwater barrier. The groundwater barrier does two things. One, it keeps the seawater out so that people can then pump from the groundwater basin. But two, it is a recharge facility. If you increase the amount of water that you put into the seawater barrier, you can increase the groundwater production in West Basin, and that will reduce the need for imported water. Groundwater is a key source for our water supply.
Thank you. Generally speaking, do you consider water resources to be a public or a private resource? In other words, do you think that the water goes to the most powerful and politically adept interests, or is it a resource that needs to be treated in a different way? Mr. Alvarez, can you start?
Water is a public resource. The waters, the surface waters and the groundwaters in the state of California are public resources. No one owns them. People own the rights to pump water, the rights to use water, but no one owns the water. And I think it's very important that we keep that in mind. If we privatize the actual ownership of water, it will be to our long-term detriment. A lot of people will be priced out of water. You're going to have this half and half nots type of situation. And then really, there is no need for it. So water, very, very important that we keep in mind that it's a public resource, that we all own it, and it should never be privatized.
Thank you. Mr. Solomon?
I agree. I do not like the trend that we've seen from water districts and state legislature toward privatization of districts. The Sativa Water District was a financial problem. It was taken over by the state and immediately resold to private. Central Basin had bills in legislature about declaring it in receivership, which they thought was going to sell it to a private. That's the wrong thing. I think there are well-managed water districts. I think West Basin is a well-managed district, and we could take on more territory. One problem of all these small water districts is the replication of overhead. Everyone has an accounting department, a billing department, a conservation department. Bigger districts that with elected members that represent the communities are the way to go. Water is a public resource. So I believe it's got to stay that way. I do disagree with Jesse on one of his 1 minutes that he took without a question, is that I think one of the problems with California generally is we do not have groundwater management policies. We don't have rules protecting our aquifers. We have incredible subsidence in the California Central Valley where we've overpumped those aquifers. I think we need to be protecting our aquifers. I think we should be refilling them right now. I'd like to be refilling them with direct potable water, treated water, in 2023. I don't want to pump those harder. I don't really want to draw them down at this point. And I was quoting the general manager of West Basin who said he doesn't have spreading grounds is why he hasn't used his allocation, for groundwater recovery.
The West Basin Municipal Water District is a member agency of the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, of course. Therefore, areas of interest to MWD are areas of interest to West Basin, I would assume. The peripheral tunnels, that's a plan for water transfer under the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta, is a controversial project for many, many reasons. I'd like to ask you if you support the project. If so, why do you support it? If not, why not? And Mr. Solomon, you can start, please.
Okay, I'm opposed to the Delta conveyance, whether it's the one tunnel they're working on now or the two tunnels they were after before. I think we need to come up with more resources ourselves from wastewater recycling and conservation and don't need that water. I'm particularly opposed to Delta Conveyance 1 is that water is not going to make it to Southern California. It's not going to come over the grapevine to us. It's going to be water banked in the San Joaquin Valley. It's something that's important to Metropolitan Water District, but not important to us. And that's one of the interesting conflicts of interest by the design of the water districts with Metropolitan. If West Basin can conserve, pump more groundwater, like Desi says, use wastewater, we don't need the Delta conveyance thing, and we should be voting against it. But considering that all the elected board members on Metropolitan, Met wants to do a big project, they want to vote for it. So it can be good for Met, it can be good for rural communities. It can have nothing to do with West Basin, but we're still burdened with the expense of it.
Mr. Alvarez?
Well, the Delta conveyance is really not necessary. Moving water across the Delta was originally a component of the State Water Project, which was launched in 1960. Okay, 60 years later, the Delta conveyance has not been built. The world hasn't fallen apart. We still have water deliveries. So the momentum for the Delta conveyance ebbs and flows with the political climate, et Met has been very active in proposing the Delta conveyance at this time. I'm not quite sure that it's a necessary project. I'm not a believer in the Delta conveyance and the amount of money that's going to cost. We've done a good job of meeting our water demand over time, and I think we can continue to do that and improve that demand management. And I think it's the key is demand management, not necessarily building facilities to move water over thousands or hundreds of miles, I should say.
Thank you. Water exporters, like the Metropolitan Water District, say that they are trying to satisfy several objectives with such a project to deliver water to residential, agriculture, and satisfying environmental purposes. Please list for me, in the order of importance, in your opinion, people, farms, fish. And Desi, we'll start with you.
Well, they're all important.
But you do
obviously
know that they're prioritized by the water industry.
Yes, we do have to make priorities in life, unfortunately, and sometimes those are hard choices. I do think that we have the ability to meet all of those demands. I think that we have a priority to meet the demand for portable water. And I think we have the ability to meet portable water. I think that we have the demand, the need to make sure that we have a food supply that's stable and affordable. And I think that we have the ability to do that. And lastly, I think that we need to protect our environment. And I think we have the ability to do that. And I think these are three competing interests that have been at fighting each other for 150 years if you look at California water. But you know what? We look at it today, and right now we're still being able to manage it, and we're able to distribute water between all of those different uses. And I think that's our responsibility, and I think we should continue to do our jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan.
I would love to take the position of saying they're all equal and not saying anything, but I will give you a ranking on that. I would say fish is first. On the endangered species side and taking care of indigenous people that live off of the salmon runs, I think we need to take care of these fisheries. There's a double benefit of not only the fisheries, we stop the saltwater incursion into the delta when we run these waters and we let the fish hatchery, the fish still run. I think we have to provide water there, and it's really not that much water. I would say people come second. I think we need to provide enough water to our people, but I think we need to have different pricing to residents. That I think you deserve a certain amount of gallons per person a day, but you shouldn't have unlimited supplies of water, run half-acre green grass, green lawns in a desert. So people, but I think we should change how we price. Agriculture is big. California is the largest ag state, but I think some of the water districts in ag land have unfavorable historic contracts that need to be refocused on and renegotiated.
Thank you. On generally the same subject, without getting too far into the political weeds, it is a fact that President Trump recently inserted himself into this state's water discussions. And in so doing, he seems to have upended many years of cooperative negotiations between the parties of interest, the state, the exporters, fishery advocates, and the Delta community. Comment, please, on this situation and give us your opinion as to whether you think President Trump was right to do so. Mr. Solomon?
Okay. I am a Democrat. I am endorsed by the Los Angeles County Democratic Party and the South Bay Democrats. So take what I have to say with a grain of salt. I think President Trump should not have gotten involved. I think all the parties you mentioned have been negotiating in as good a faith as they can. I think the solution they've come to makes everyone equally uncomfortable and equally miserable. And I think the parties were working better together. And I think these were negotiations that aren't helped by being thrown out into the light of day. The people who in the Trump administration have been running Department of Interior, EPA, agriculture, these are industry people. These are ex-lobbyists. These are people who have shown to have been working for the lobbyists for the big agricultural water districts. And I think when there wasn't as much of a light on it, the big water district, Westlands, they would let more water go. We were getting enough water for the fisheries. We were importing adequate amounts to Southern California. I think the extra light and the threats have not helped. Sorry, I ran over.
Well, thank you. Mr. Alvarez?
I won't run over. I'll give you a quick answer. I don't think he should have got involved. I believe that, the parties that have been negotiating this issue for a long time will continue to negotiate it. President Trump's not going to be around forever, and his actions were just misplaced, was not a good idea, should not have gotten involved. At that level, it's just not appropriate. And it does speak to the power of just money and politics to get that the president would actually step in and do something like that.
Let's talk a little bit about both climate change and the pandemic. Both very likely will have a significant impact on future water supplies for Southern California. Could you give us your thoughts on how those problems might be mitigated? Mr. Alvarez, you want to start?
Climate change and the pandemic. I think that climate change is something that, in the terms of, from the picture of the water, that it's going to be manageable, that we do have the resources today to continue to manage our supply of water. There are many components to that. We referred to it earlier, but I believe that we can do a better job of usage. So water conservation is a big component in reducing that. Water reuse and going complete recycling would be the way to go. We can use the water. I mean, we do it on spaceships. So I think that we can do that. The pandemic, not quite sure has that big of an impact on water. It doesn't affect water supplies. Our water is very safe and I don't see it as an issue.
Okay, Mr. Sullivan, please.
Okay, I think climate change is having a huge impact on the world. I think it's scandalous the US backed out of the Paris Accords, and we need to be looking to do what we can to reduce greenhouse gases. The planet is warming, the ice caps are melting, the ocean levels are rising, and we have the technology to stop the saltwater incursion into our freshwater resources. So we're going to have to step up the barriers and make sure we keep that back. As we have climate change, especially in Southern California, it's going to be more arid, it's going to be more warmer, and we have to make sure we change how we live and we change the type of landscaping we have to adjust to the fact that it's warmer and we can't dump limitless amounts of water on it. West Basin in its board meetings has been worried about the impact of COVID on all the cities, that people are home using more water, businesses in their cities aren't using water. But as all the cities, West Basin has been through it and met, there hasn't been a big impact on water use at this point.
Interesting, thank you. If you are elected to the board, what's going to be your first priority, Mr. Alvarez?
My first priority is going to be to really get involved in stopping the desalination project and the spending that's going along with that. That's a very critical area. It's going to take a lot of work. There's a lot of momentum that the district has behind desalination. And I think that I am in a position where I probably can do a very good job at slowing that down. So in terms of priorities, it's stopping the desalination project. That's my first and highest priority. My second priority is to increase the use of recycled water. I think that we can do a much better job of that so that eventually we're better using all our resources and we're not using water once and then dumping it out into the ocean. We need to create better partnerships with the city of Los Angeles and the Hyperion plant. And I think they would be willing partners, and we should increase the amount of recycled water. Sorry, I'm running out of time here.
Mr. Sullivan, same question, please.
Priority one is stopping ocean water desal. We've spent at least 67 million on the legal, engineering, and environmental work. The West Basin is being sued by LA waterkeepers, saying that EIR was inadequate. I want to stop funding those legal suits. I want to let it go. Second is we need to start working from a strategic basis on wastewater recycling. They're working on a long-term capital plan from 2009. It is not best practices to have an 11-year-old plan you haven't updated. We need to have a new plan. We need to review operations. We need to see why every meeting I go to, they've got the wrong cleaner, the wrong filters on the RO, and they keep giving an excuse, I can't make more recycled water because I can't sell it. Well, I can lead them and show them how to put in a sales and marketing effort to get people to take recycled water. That's easy. And conservation, we've gotten stale. Lunch and learns and rain barrels are not the way to reduce usage by 15%. We need to drive it in new and better ways.
Thank you. Let's do a hypothetical. If you were appointed California's water czar and you had total control over the resource and total control over a budget to deal with any ideas you might have, what would you do?
Okay, the first thing I would do would be balance uses between farming and residential. If I had complete power, I would go off of some of the historical irrigation water district contracts where they have an overly large claim of water on the Central Valley and in the Imperial Valley, and I would redo that. I would put in strenuous rules and do it through pricing and market forces to make sure that if people use more than the base case line of water, their water rates will go up significantly per gallon per person per day, and we will drive conservation through pricing. That will be a very effective thing. I will work on wastewater recycling as something we do throughout the state, because I think that's the greatest source of water, and we can really get our landscape and irrigation use is done with that. And I will try to make sure we balance the environmental uses. And environmental justice is a big deal. We need to make sure the lowest part of the members of the community pay least for water, and that water is not a de facto regressive tax.
Mr. Alvarez.
All right, if I was the water czar of the state, the one thing I would focus on is making water affordable for all of our citizens. Right now, we are having a lot of citizens that are being priced, impacted severely by the cost of water. And that can be done by better managing the overall water resource. I think some of the things Mr. Solomon and I have both been saying throughout this conversation go to that end. We do have some very wasteful users of this resource who have very old rights to the use of the water. Those people and those primarily their big irrigation districts need to be brought under control. And that would require a czar, because the reality is that by the nature of California water law, it's very difficult to bring any kind of order and responsibility to those agencies. And I think we've talked about this, but recycling water and better use of the water in the water cycle is critical.
Thank you. It wasn't more than 20, 25 years ago that cotton was king in the Central Valley. I read recently that there are now 2 million acres of almond trees in the Central Valley. Almond trees, other trees, as you all know, requires irrigation year-round. Cotton was a very intensive water user, but it only used water during the growing period. Given that fact, how do you think you might impact what essentially would be a sociological change or a shift away from that type of agriculture, which incidentally, most of the product, 70% of it is shipped overseas. Does that seem like a logical use of California's water resources to you, Desi?
I don't think that that's a very good use of water, the way it's being used right now for some of the orchard crops. I have seen flood irrigation for almond orchards. I'm not quite sure why it's necessary to flood irrigate almond orchards. And I'm not quite sure that we need to produce as many almonds as we do for export. Almonds is a very healthy nut, and I eat a lot of almonds, so I'm not anti-almonds, but I think it could be better managed. But the key is, how is water used in agriculture? If we look at Israel, they're much, much more efficient in growing all kinds of crops because of the technologies that they employ. We don't, because water is relatively cheap in some areas and expensive in other areas, and there is no equity. We need to focus on developing that equity so that people make more practical decisions in what they grow and how they grow it, and ultimately on how much water is being consumed.
Thank you. Mr. Solomon?
I would largely agree with a lot of what Desi was saying. Almonds were a free market choice that farmers could get those trees ready to grow fast. They were not subject to the same bugs and blights that many of the other citrus crops were. And water was so cheap, they were able to put something in that gave them the greatest cash flow per acre. When we start to change some of the historical contracts that irrigation districts have, they will start to find almonds uneconomic. But I think there's got to be a plan that when we change the water rates, we've got to be showing them crops that are more drought tolerant, use less water, can be handled through drip irrigation, to be able to help them and actually give government subsidies to get the farmers to change. We have the greatest ag universities in the country here, UC Davis, the Cal Poly system. We can help them find crops and introduce that use less water and show them how to use less water in their planting. Because if you've got places that don't have water, they are less efficient and they can't flood irrigate.
Thank you. Desi, did you answer that question? I'm sorry.
I did answer that question.
You did. Well,
but I can go on about one of the reasons why we have flood irrigation.
Go ahead.
I just want to go back to this use of groundwater. I know of friends who have orchards in the Central Valley, and they do flood irrigate, and they flood irrigate by pumping. And there's no restrictions on them because they're living in a groundwater area where there's no management of the groundwater basin. and that's an abuse of the system. I think that groundwater can be much better managed in the state of California, and it is down here. In the West Basin, the Central Basin, and all of the basins in Los Angeles, there are adjudicated basins. The groundwater is controlled. You can't overpump the basin, and there is recharge that is responsible for replenishing the water that's being pumped out. So in a managed basin, you could do a much better job. And West Basin can much better improve its operations vis-a-vis Central Basin, where the majority of the water is groundwater, not imported water, and the replenishment activities there keep that basin very full. In the West Basin, we import over 100,000 acre-feet of water a year. And that's not necessary when you can increase the production of groundwater from about 15,000 acre-feet to over 60,000 acre-feet, which would be the safe yield of the basin.
Mr. Solomon, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I think the issue is, I wasn't aware of the Central Basin numbers. That's interesting. I think we just have to make sure that we continue to balance the agricultural needs versus the residential needs. I think we can't drive the farmers out of business. We need to bring them substitute crops, show them we can maintain their income levels up, because agriculture is an important part of the state. And we can't do things purely for residential that kills the agricultural part of the population. So I think a lot of that is rotating into crops. We rotated from cotton, and we've rotated from cotton to almonds. Almonds wasn't a great decision. We need to find different plants that we can do. I think some more farming, getting the big corporate farms to do more grown local, source local, as a way we can do more crops that are more water efficient.
Thank you. Probably time here to kind of wrap this up. Each of you will have at least 1 minute. You can probably run over a little bit because we are short, to wrap up your conversations and tell the voters why you are the logical candidate to vote for. Mr. Solomon, you want to start?
I will be an active board member of West Basin. I've been very active in West Basin as an observer, going to meetings, making public comments, requesting information I can distribute, and being at their meetings and putting another voice in. Second, West Basin has 290 million of debt. They have no financial expertise on the board. I am a financial expert. I was a banker doing multi-$100 million capital projects. I manage large manufacturing and distribution firms, so I can help them in making the right financial decisions. There's expanding wastewater. We are going to have to borrow. We are going to have to put money into capital. And I manage businesses to efficiency. And I also feel like I will be able to get the costs down and show them some great practices. And we don't need Suez to run that plant. We have the skills to run that water recycling plant ourselves and bring jobs directly to residents of West Basin.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Alvarez?
I think the West Basin Municipal Water District is an agency that requires a lot better attention, and I'm going to be a very active board member. And I think I bring a lot of expertise with a significant amount of water management and operational experience to focus. And with that expertise, I think I can improve the overall operation of the West Basin Municipal Water District, definitely improve its finances. As has been referred to, they do have an extreme amount of debt. And if they go on in the path they're going to continue to have debt. And that debt is not necessary, not well used, etc. So their overall financial structure needs to be evaluated. And I think I'm in a very good position as someone who's run an agency, understand how the money is spent, understand what's needed and what isn't needed, where it's being misspent and where it's not.
Well, thank you very much.
I look forward to being of service on the West Basin Municipal Water District Board and encourage everyone to vote for Desi Alvarez. Go to alvarezforwater.com.
Thank you, Desi. Pardon my interruption on you there at the end. Well, that kind of brings our debate to a close. It was, I thought, very polite, very informative. I enjoyed myself a great deal. I'd like to thank both of you for participating. And I'd also like to thank both of you for participating in public activities. You know, running for office is about the only way we keep any control over our own government. So thank you both very much for your participation and for your civic responsibility. Again, thank you and good night.
Thank you for hosting us.